Have you ever wondered why, beneath the polished surface of the modern man, beneath the charm and reason, there lurks a shadow, a primal undertow pulling at the edges of his consciousness? Within every man's ego lie dark desires, whispers from the depths of his unconscious, pulsing with raw urgency, threatening to unravel the carefully constructed tapestry of civility he presents to the world. These desires, hidden not only by conscious denial but by layers of societal expectation, are the archetypal shadows that Carl Jung so profoundly described. They are the forbidden fires in the hearth of his being, shaping his actions, his passions, even his wounds. The first of these dark desires is the hunger for absolute power, the intoxication of dominion, not just over others, but over his own fractured self. It is a desire birthed from a deep-seated fear, the fear of insignificance, of being swallowed by irrelevance in a world that demands control and valor. This thirst for power is not mere bravado or external conquest. It is the ego's desperate cry for validation, a mask for fragile self-worth battered by vulnerability. It manifests in subtle ways: dominance in conversation, the hunger to be heard and followed, the silent calculation behind every confident move. For beneath the aggression and authority lies a chasm of insecurity demanding to be filled. And yet, this very craving harms the soul's growth, imprisoning the man in roles written by collective expectation rather than the true call of individuation. You watch him, and you see it. The restless spark in his eyes when control slips away, the tension in his voice when his will is challenged. This is not the surface self, but the buried archetype of the warrior, marred by wounds that only shadow work can heal. If you dare to pierce this armor, you confront the paradox. His dominance is also his vulnerability, and his deepest power lies in surrender to self-awareness. But beware, for this desire, when left unexamined, twists into tyranny, not merely over others, but over himself. The second dark desire seeps through the hidden corridors of the male unconscious, a fierce craving for freedom, wild and untamed, threatening to shatter all bonds. It is the restless spirit of the rebel archetype, refusing to be caged by tradition, society, or even reason. This rebellion is often fueled by trauma, a childhood where love was conditional, where trust was fractured, where the soul learned that freedom must be wrested by force or lost forever. It manifests as a paradoxical dance between attachment and flight, between craving intimacy and fearing its vulnerability. You see it in his insistence on independence, in the silent walls he builds around his heart, and in the subtle sabotage of relationships that threaten to expose his fragility. This is no mere stubbornness. It is a shadow yearning, a cry against the chains of conformity, but also a prison of loneliness. The man caught in this desire is both fierce and fragile, a storm seeking solace, yet fearing the calm. Here lies the tragic vulnerability of the male spirit, his desire for emotional sovereignty so intense that it blinds him to the safety found in true connection. You, as a woman, may find yourself drawn to this wildness, mistaking it for strength, yet it is a call for healing, for courage to face the darker parts of his soul, to integrate the rebel with the lover, the chaos with the peace. The third dark desire is perhaps the most silent, most insidious, the hunger for recognition, not as a child might crave applause, but as a man wrestles with his place in the world, his meaning, and his legacy. This desire dwells in the shadow of the creator archetype, shaping not just his achievements, but his identity. It drives him to build, to conquer, to leave a mark on history, not for vanity, but as proof that he mattered, that his life was not a whisper lost in the void. It flickers in moments of frustration when efforts go unnoticed, in the silent ache of loneliness when true appreciation is absent. This hunger is both light and shadow, a source of inspiration and a potential trap. For the man who is enslaved by this desire, recognition is never enough. It morphs into a relentless pursuit of validation that drains his spirit and distances him from authentic selfhood. He becomes a mirror constantly searching for reflected glory, blind to the radiant truth inside. The shadow here is the misalignment of ego and essence, where the soul's cry for meaning gets drowned out by the hollow echoes of external praise. To liberate himself, he must turn inward, embracing the Stoic wisdom that true worth flows from virtue and inner peace, not from the applause of the crowd. These three dark desires, power, freedom, and recognition, are the unconscious engines driving much of a man's behavior, often misunderstood, feared, or resisted by those around him. They are not evil nor shameful. They are fragments of the primal masculine psyche, crying out for integration rather than rejection. The tragedy unfolds when these desires control the ego rather than being consciously engaged. The ego, blind to its own shadows, projects these desires outward, manifesting as control, rebellion, or craving that confounds and confuses his closest relationships. Yet in this shadow play lies the path to transformation. The wise woman knows that beneath the surface of these dark desires lies a wounded boy seeking healing, a warrior craving honor, a rebel yearning for love, and a creator desiring to be seen. To meet him authentically, you must approach not with judgment, but with fierce understanding, holding space for his shadows while illuminating the path toward individuation. For it is only when the man faces these desires within, acknowledging their power and relinquishing their hold, that he can become whole, stepping from the prison of his ego into the freedom of his true self. And you, standing on the edge of this revelation, are invited to witness the sacred dance between light and dark, to hold the tension of these opposing forces without fear. Your strength lies not in taming the man to your will, but in embracing the complex mosaic of his psyche with open eyes and open heart. This journey is heartbreaking and beautiful, an odyssey toward emotional sovereignty where both of you may rise, not in conquest, but in communion. Let this be a call to awakening. Beneath every man's ego lies a shadow waiting to be met, not conquered. The woman who dares to navigate these depths does not shrink from the darkness, but uses it as a mirror reflecting her own power, her own complexity, and her own liberation. Power, freedom, recognition. These threads weave through the male ego like hidden currents beneath a turbulent sea. As these desires stir, the man is caught in a relentless internal battle between the shadows he hides and the light he yearns to embody. This conflict rages quietly, invisible to many, yet it shapes his every movement, his every word spoken and unspoken. You may sense this when he withdraws suddenly, or when his intensity borders on fury, or when his gaze flickers with a secret pain. What you are witnessing are the ghosts of his shadow, stirring restlessly in the twilight between self-knowledge and self-deception. Within the realm of power, there lies a paradox most profound, that the strongest force is the ability to surrender. A man's ego, grasping desperately for control, often fears that surrender signals weakness. Yet it is only when he embraces the boundaries of his own control, when he acknowledges the limits of power, that true strength is born. This is the whispered wisdom of Stoic philosophy, hidden beneath the armor of masculine bravado. Seneca taught that the greatest power is mastery of self, the courage to face one's flaws without projection or blame. What fear keeps him shackled to the illusion of dominating others is the same fear you are called to soften with your fearless presence. Because to soften is not to weaken, but to illuminate the path back to authentic power. In the dance of freedom, the rebellious flame burns fierce and wild, yet it often conceals a deeper yearning for belonging and acceptance. The wild man, striking out at the invisible chains of societal expectation, might repel you with his storm. But it is in this rebellion that he seeks a sacred autonomy, the right to define his own soul beyond the suffocating scripts handed down by culture, family, and past trauma. You may feel his restlessness as a challenge, even a rejection, but it is also an invitation to witness the wounds beneath the mask. It is here, in the crucible of his resistance, that you have the opportunity to become a mirror reflecting his worth, unconditional, unwavering. The question becomes not how to tame this wildness, but how to honor it while guiding it toward integration, the moment where chaos embraces order and turmoil births peace. Recognition, that hunger for validation beyond vanity, exposes the fractures between ego identity and soul essence. The creator archetype in man craves acknowledgement not simply for what he builds or achieves, but for the fragile self he enshrines beneath the accolades. When this desire becomes desperate, he chases shadows, intoxicated by applause yet empty within, a perilous dance leading toward disconnection. The shadow of this desire often manifests as insecurity masked behind pride, competitiveness veiled as confidence. Yet beneath these facades lies the silent ache to be truly seen, not as a perfect warrior or unbreakable rebel, but as a whole, imperfect man deserving of love and belonging. To stand beside a man bearing these dark desires is to hold a sacred transformative space. It requires the courage to look into the fire of his shadows and remain unscorched, to listen without rushing to fix, to witness the dance of light and dark with empathy that breaks rather than binds. In this witness, healing begins, not by extinguishing his shadows, but by naming them, naming the pain that lives behind his craving for control, freedom, and recognition. When spoken aloud, these shadows lose their dominion, becoming allies in the intricate journey toward wholeness. In this unfolding, the woman holds immense power, yet it is a power that transcends control. It is the power of presence, of seeing beyond the ego's defenses to the raw, vulnerable soul beneath. It is the power to evoke the man's hidden self by offering acceptance rather than judgment, by inviting self-reflection rather than inciting defensiveness. In this sacred exchange, both man and woman step into the process of individuation, not a conquest of one over the other, but a mutual evolution toward authenticity. Remember that a man's shadow is not his enemy. It is the neglected part of his psyche, longing for recognition and integration. The more these shadows are denied, the more they hold sway, distorting both the self and his relationship with others. But when met with fierce compassion, these dark desires become gateways, thresholds through which the psyche must pass to reach the transformative light of self-mastery and mature love. They call forth from the depths a man who is not afraid to be whole, who no longer needs to prove himself through domination or defiance, whose power is tempered by wisdom, whose freedom is grounded in connection, whose legacy is a heart fully known. This is the man who can love without losing himself, who can stand beside a woman not as a competitor or a conqueror, but as a fellow traveler on the path of emotional sovereignty. This is the man you confront when you refuse to settle for surface charm or brittle strength, when you look behind the facades and say, "I see you, all of you, and I will not turn away." In this refusal lies the alchemy of transformation, the sacred invitation to step beyond codependence and toward radical authenticity. And so, the journey continues, deeper still into the labyrinth of psyche and shadow, where each dark desire must be met with courage and discernment. The man's ego, for all its wounds and disguises, holds the key to profound growth when he embraces the challenge to integrate these shadows. And you, poised as the radiant feminine, hold the mirror that reflects truth and calls forth greatness, not by chasing the darkness away, but by walking boldly into it, unafraid, unyielding, and unwavering. The dark desires in a man's ego are not mere fleeting impulses. They are ancient fires burning with the heat of his ancestral lineage, the echoes of the caveman, the philosopher, the warrior, and the creator. These desires are entwined with his wounds, his trauma, and the fractured mirrors through which he views himself. To understand the depths of these shadows, one must surrender to the reverberations beneath the surface, the silent screams and unspoken longings that pulse like a hidden heartbeat, shaping his soul's restless quest for integration. Power, at its rawest, is the shadow's attempt to fill the hollowness of self-doubt. Behind every act of dominance lies a silent question. Do I exist enough? Am I enough? The ego's grasp at power is a fragile fortress built upon a foundation of fear and unmet needs. Yet it is also a doorway, cracked and splintered, through which the man may glimpse the truth of his own vulnerability. To walk through this door requires the reckoning with the wounded child, the part of him that learned early on that love and acceptance must be earned through strength. This childhood shadow, when unearthed, is not a weakness to be exploited, but a treasure to be honored, a mourning for innocence lost, and a promise of rebirth. As you witness his battles for control, you may feel the sharp edges of his defense, a fortress constructed of pride and assertion. But within these walls, there is a secret language waiting to be heard. The language of humility disguised as arrogance, the language of need veiled as indifference. To hold space for this truth is to invite healing not through domination, but through recognition of shared brokenness. The infamous Stoic mantra rings clear here. He who conquers himself is the mightiest warrior. The man's true power waits folded in this paradox. The power to surrender his false self and to become whole. The desire for freedom flares bright and wild, a tempest that refuses to be chained, yet yearns for sanctuary. This is the shadow rebel, the spirit scorched by betrayals and limitations, seeking escape from the wounds inflicted by dependency. His wildness is both a shield and a cry, a desperate effort to hold autonomy in a world that threatens to crush the soul's delicate autonomy. But the irony is stark. In his frantic flight, he often circles back to his darkest fear, that freedom without connection is loneliness, a void where meaning dissolves. To meet this wildness is to dance with contradiction. The woman who approaches this rebel, not with demands, but with a fearless heart, becomes the unsought harbor amidst the storm. She does not cage him, but holds the tension of his fury and his fragility, his need for distance, and his cry for closeness. Here, beneath the tempest, lies the invitation to reimagine freedom, not as a lack of bonds, but as the liberation found within safe, chosen attachment. This is where love becomes revolutionary, not through possession, but through liberation, transforming chaos into grace. The hunger for recognition is quieter, but no less fierce. A smoldering ache within the creator archetype, whose soul insists on imprinting meaning upon the world. This desire is a sacred fire, fueled by the primal human yearning to be seen, known, and remembered. But when the ego confuses recognition for worth, the dance becomes perilous. The man chases shadows, mistaking applause and accolades for the embrace of his soul, spinning a dizzying cycle that leaves him exhausted and hollow. In this hunger, pride, and shame entangle in a painful tango. Public triumphs become armor, masking a private loneliness that no external validation can erase. Yet the creator's redemption comes when he steps back from the crowd and meets the self in solitude, awakening to the Stoic teaching that worth is innate. Worth is rooted in virtue and presence, not trophies or titles. The man's true legacy is not written in fame or fortune, but in the quiet dignity of authenticity, the courage to live with integrity when no one is watching. These three desires, power, freedom, and recognition, are themselves reflections of a deeper universal shadow. The fear of fragmentation, the dread of insignificance, and the hunger for wholeness. Each desire is a thread in the complex tapestry of a man's psyche, threatening to tear or to unite, depending on whether they are met with shadow work or repression. In this lies the crucible of transformation, where the fractured pieces can be gathered and woven into a mosaic of integrated selfhood. For the woman who stands with him, this journey is not one of taming or fixing, but of bearing witness and co-creation. It demands fierce compassion, unshakable boundaries, and the courage to navigate the depths without losing oneself. She becomes the reflection in which he sees not only his darkness, but the promise of light, his anima, the bridge towards his soul's awakening. Together, they traverse the labyrinth of ego and shadow, neither dominating nor fleeing, but dancing in a sacred rhythm of recognition and release. It is here, within this crucible of vulnerability and strength, that the man's dark desires transform from chains into wings, from silence into song. This is the alchemy of the soul's rebirth, where power is sovereignty, freedom is love, and recognition is the quiet radiance of being fully seen and fully known. The shadow of a man, dense and profound, is a dark undercurrent carrying the bitter truths he refuses to face. It is the crucible where power, freedom, and recognition collide, not as simple cravings, but as tangled wounds shaped by ancestral echoes and personal scars. To gaze into this shadow is to confront the abyss of his soul, a landscape both terrifying and luminous, where the psyche's darkest desires gather like storm clouds, charged with the potential to either destroy or transform. The hunger for power, entwined with vulnerability, is the eternal paradox of the masculine spirit. It is a fortress built of fears and defenses, yet its foundation trembles with an unspoken plea: to be truly seen, to be truly whole. This desire often masquerades as dominance, but is born from a void carved by early rejection or neglect, a place where the child within learned to armor himself against the world. Here lies the deep invitation. The true sovereign man is not the one who conquers others, but the one who masters his own tempest, who shifts from ego's ruthless command to the gentle rule of self-compassion. It is the awakening of the warrior who no longer fights shadows but embraces them as teachers. Freedom, that fierce and untamed flame, is the rebel's cry against chains unseen yet deeply felt. It is the spirit battered by betrayal, yet unwilling to surrender its flight. This desire is as much about escape as it is about the search for sanctuary, a sanctuary of trust where the wildness is neither punished nor tamed, but understood and honored. The rebel's deepest wound is the terrifying vulnerability that comes with genuine connection. The woman who steps into this sacred space without fear becomes a mirror to his authenticity, a beacon calling him home from exile. She learns that freedom and love are not enemies, but entwined paths leading to soulful liberation. Recognition, the silent ache within the creator archetype, is perhaps the most tender shadow of all. It is an existential yearning to be acknowledged, not for superficial achievements, but for the raw, imperfect essence of being. When recognition is sought through ego alone, it becomes a hollow chase, a restless dance on shifting sands. Yet when it arises from the soul's depth, recognition blossoms into a quiet power rooted in integrity and presence. This is the wisdom that Stoicism imparts, that the truest worth is earned in solitude and perseverance, far from the spotlight. The man who attains this peace no longer seeks validation outside, but nourishes an inner sanctuary where his spirit rests, radiant and free. Together, these desires, power, freedom, recognition, form a shadow triad within the man's psyche. They are neither enemies nor obstacles, but essential teachers demanding integration. Denied, they fracture the self and poison relationships. Embraced, they spark profound growth and transformation. The journey toward wholeness requires that both man and woman step into the sacred interplay of light and dark with courage and grace. She offers a fearless witnessing. He offers humble vulnerability. Together, they rewrite the narrative from conflict to communion. To the woman who embraces this shadow dance, remember, your power lies not in controlling or corralling, but in holding space, unwavering and fierce, for his shadows to breathe and be seen. Your strength is your presence. Your love is the light that invites healing without judgment. When you refuse to shrink from his darkness, you ignite the possibility of alchemy where ego's chains dissolve, and a new, radiant man emerges, whole, sovereign, and deeply known. The crucible of these dark desires is the birthplace of transcendence. It challenges the ego's illusions and invites the emergence of a soul awake. Here, the man sheds the masks forged by fear and steps boldly into the vast terrain of authentic being. And you, standing beside him, become the luminous guide who walks the labyrinth of psychic shadows, fearless and unyielding. This sacred journey is the dance of anima and animus, shadow and light, fracture and healing. It is the timeless story written in the depths of human souls, a story of fall and rise, of loss and reclaiming, of pain and profound love. And from this sacred alchemy arises the ultimate truth of union. The power of shadow embraced is the power of love unleashed. The culmination of this intricate journey into the man's shadow calls forth a final reckoning, a moment where the dark desires no longer bind but illuminate, where the fractured ego finds its soul, and the restless spirit discovers peace within the sacred embrace of wholeness. The woman who dares to walk this path steps beyond the ordinary, beyond the simple roles inscribed by culture and expectation. She becomes the alchemist of transformation, the fierce guardian of boundaries, and the tender witness to the man's soul unfolding. She understands that beneath the masquerade of control, rebellion, and yearning for recognition, there lies a man trembling on the edge of awakening, a man who longs not to conquer or escape, but to be met in his rawest essence. She holds space for the shadow without flinching, meeting each dark desire with neither judgment nor fear, but with a compassion so fierce, it burns yet so gentle, it heals. In this sacred encounter, the man glimpses a reflection not of demand or expectation, but of true seeing, a mirror that until now was absent from his fractured world. The power he sought in dominance softens into the sovereignty of self-mastery. His rebellion, once a chaotic tempest, quiets into a resilient freedom born not of flight, but of choice. The hunger for recognition fades into the steady light of inner worth, no longer desperate for applause, but nourished by the inviolable sanctity of being. This transformation is neither sudden nor simple. It is the slow unfolding of the individuation process, the alchemical marriage of light and shadow that Jung so revered. Together, they enter a new dance, not of possession or escape, but of radical authenticity and mutual liberation. Where once the ego demanded surrender to its fragmented fears, now the soul calls forth a union, rooted in respect, vulnerability, and steadfast love. The woman, no longer chasing illusions or chasing shadows, stands firm in the radiant clarity of her own essence. She knows that love is not a binding chain, but a shared flight toward freedom, a fearless embrace of complexity rather than a retreat into simplicity. Here, at the peak of this shared odyssey, the echo of Stoic wisdom resounds. He who is brave is free. Courage to confront shadow, courage to love without losing self, courage to choose peace over perpetual struggle. This is the freedom born from fire. And you, witnessing and walking this path, become the living testament to that truth. In this final awakening, the dark desires dissolve, not by denial, but by fierce, illuminating recognition. Power becomes sovereign strength. Freedom becomes chosen presence. Recognition becomes inner light. The man takes his place not as a fragmented ego battling the world, but as a whole being standing in stillness and power. And the woman, in her unwavering knowing, no longer chases shadows or fragile facades. She simply chooses. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.